Welcome into the Toyota Lounge for the DNVR Avalanche Podcast, powered by your Front Range Toyota dealerships. We got Megan, we got Eric, and we got Rudo in studio today. The schedule for the whole NHL really actually released back near the draft, but obviously we were a little busy with things like the draft and free agency at the time. So now that we're into off-season proper, I figured it was a good time to take a look at the schedule, go over some of the things on it, and, the Avs' general concept. We've talked a lot about time management or time on ice management for Colorado and fatigue management across entire seasons, especially when it comes to things like goaltenders. Before we get into some of the actual specifics, just based purely on vibes, do you think the Avs got a good schedule this year?
In looking at the back-to-back specifically for this show, I was seeing 10 as the number for a lot of teams across the board. So the Avs coming in at 12 doesn't seem completely favorable. And some of the teams that they're seeing on the second leg of a back-to-back more than once, I think makes it an ultimately kind of challenging schedule, and their January is crazy.
January is.
But I do think getting some of these tests in before the Four Nations face-off Christmas break time frame is better for them, so they can have a really strong back half of the season, and hopefully there aren't any moments where they need to shake off a little bit of rust. That, I look at the Devon Taves Chicago Blackhawks game where he made those comments, and that was in December time frame. So I kind of would like to see them get these sort of things figured out before that jam-packed January and just have a strong back half of the year, and I feel really good about the season ahead.
What I like the most, I'm going to say, is their October. And I'll tell you why. I like the first game of the year when you're on the road. I like that. Don't ask me why. I just always felt that you can control the jitters a little bit better when you're on the road. And, you're just focused. You're at the hotel. You go to the game. Game's over. You get on the bus. And if you look at the Avs, their schedule is obviously that VGK game being their first game on the road. I love that. And then you get home. And again, what you're going to do is you're getting a lot of – it's probably VGK's home opener too, right? You know what I mean? So you're getting one game home. I hate sometimes you go 3-4 games in a row where you're getting their other team's home opener. You're like, by the third or fourth one, you're like, oh, my God. Like, you know what I mean? Like, please, like, end this. You know what I mean? So if you look at their schedule, they don't hit the road till the 20th. I mean, I don't think that would be San Jose's first home game. You know what I mean? So I think they only catch one of those games where you're just sitting there and waiting, and it happens to be the first one, which is fine. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, you know what? You haven't played in months, so that doesn't bother you much. You know what I mean? And mentally, obviously, you used to sit on the bench, you know what I mean? Where nowadays, like, it's a little better where the visiting team will come out a little later. And back then we used to sit there and just like, oh my Lord, you're just watching this whole thing unfold, and it was terrible. But only one of those games, you get on the road, then you get home, and it's Saturday night, you get Columbus. First game of the year at home. I'm not saying Columbus is an easy prey, but I'm saying Columbus is a team you should pounce on, right? Then all of a sudden you got a team that you've had some sort of a rivalry with in VGK, right, on the road. Then you get home, and then you play every other day, get in the rhythm, you're at home, and then I love that road trip right there. You're 5 games into the season, and then you're going to a San Jose, Seattle, Utah, 3 games in 5 nights. Perfect to bond a little bit as a team. There will be some new guys. Every year there's a new guy. So there might be a few new guys. It's good to get on the road. It's good to gel. It's good to go out together as a team, go to restaurants, and get to know one another. That's how you go on a plane ride. That's how you get to know someone if you don't know them. What are your hobbies? What is it? What's your family like? Do you have kids? Well, how does this thing work? Where it's a little different than taking a bus going to a game and then, you're concentrating on the game. So when you're going between cities, it's kind of nice. to get to know one another. And I think that trip is perfect there for the Avalanche. And of course, like you said, January it gets a little crazy, but I love the fact that their October is solid in the sense that I'm talking about, and then you can get off on the right foot there for the season.
I'll be honest, this is the best I've felt about an Avs schedule in a while. I think a lot of years I feel like there's a bunch of wonkiness to it, especially early in the season. It feels like they have 4-day breaks all over the place a lot of the time. This year it doesn't feel like that. Eric, you mentioned the word rhythm. I think it should be a lot easier this year for the Avs to find a little bit of rhythm in that schedule, especially early in the season. Megan, you mentioned the back-to-backs. 12 of them isn't great. Don't love it. What I will say is looking at a lot of them, the travel on most of them is not bad. Their first one's actually a double home back-to-back, which is pretty rare, but nice there. And then you look at some of the other ones, and you get travel that's pretty easy. They play in Dallas, and they play one at home against Edmonton. They have the San Jose Anaheim one that's very easy. They do the Alberta one with Calgary and Edmonton too. So there is a lot of travel, but it's not... You're not getting a back-to-back that's like Boston and then you fly home or something like that. It's a lot of local travel, not too many crazy late nights when it comes to these back-to-backs for Colorado. So I do think there is at least that to take as a positive from these back-to-backs. The other side of the back-to-backs, there are 12 of them. Eric's going to hate this. 9 of them are 3 and 4s. So...
That was going to be the next point. You know what I mean? And you know me. I don't mind the back-to-back. Adrian's got a good point there. Dallas Edmonton's a tough one. That's a tough back-to-back. But like Rudo just said, there's a lot of them are not that bad. But for me, and again, I'm going back to my days many pounds ago as an athlete, 3 and 4 was the toughest. You know what I mean? Like 3 and 4 is the toughest. The third one, you just... And sometimes the 3 and 4 is on a back-to-back, right? Because you catch the back-to-back on the
fourth day, yeah.
On the fourth day. So those are the worst. Those are the worst. Again, if you played in the American League, you get used to it a little bit with the 3 and 3s, which again I think that should be ridiculous. That should be banned forever. I don't know how you can judge a guy on this third night. It used to be the stupidest thing in the world, and it's usually 2 and 2.5, 3 and 2.5, right? Because it was Sunday afternoon. So, but yeah, the 3 and 4. How many are there? You said. It was just
9 of the 12 back-to-backs are 3 and 4s.
I mean that's. I remember one year we had 17 back-to-backs. I felt that was a lot. You got to remember that schedule is pretty complex. It's all about TV, right? And then who the league wants on those big TV nights, right? With the national games, and then your building availability comes to play a lot. And it's not a work in progress in the sense that it's 2 weeks and next thing you know the schedule's done. Usually there's somebody in the organization back then. It was always like the assistant GM dealing with that, and I don't know who deals with it nowadays, but you put in your dates, you put in the things you want, then you get your top 3 choices. It's like anything else, right? Then it's a lottery and a draft, and you know what I mean? If you get that number 1, then you're not going to get your second. To be honest, back then we used to always... It was a big thing for my dad. Like he wanted to be home for the holidays, meaning he wanted the players to be home for the holidays. If you go back in this over the years, the Avalanche had a lot of games always at Christmas time. Those 2 weeks that the team was home. That can be good. That can be bad. You know what I mean? Because you're so busy and running around and everything. So, but it sounds like they've gotten away from that the last few years. You don't see that anymore. It wasn't one of their priorities because if you're, like I said to you, you do have your priorities to put in there. So maybe they've gotten away from that, but you do look at stuff. Sometimes it's like it feels like it's an oversight because you look at the game and you're like, how the hell was this scheduled? You know what I mean? And it's, believe me, whoever is, and they're going through it with the Avs, and like a fine comb. And I'm talking about months ago, and then you fight the ones that you feel it's a schedule loss, right? You fight it. You might not get it. But at times it does look like an oversight, but it's not. It just couldn't be made. It just couldn't fit. It just wasn't going to work, and the league wasn't able to accommodate it. So It's not an easy thing. I remember years ago, it used to be on a big board on the wall and a dry erase board. Obviously, now with technology, it's a lot different. But I tell you one thing, it still doesn't make it easy. It is not easy to make the schedule for a National Hockey League, 32 teams. It is freaking tough. But I think for all intents purposes, right here, I do like their schedule. I feel that it's pretty fair schedule.
And looking at those back-to-backs, Colorado's record over the last 5 seasons
very
has
good,
been
yeah.
incredible, 72, 25, and 11 in back-to-backs. And then those 3 teams that I mentioned that they faced twice on the second leg of a back-to-back are Anaheim, Edmonton, and Minnesota. Anaheim will be rested each time, but Edmonton will also be on the second leg of a back-to-back one of those times.
Some balance there.
Minnesota
yeah.
will get Colorado on one of their second legs of a back-to-back at a different time, and so there's some neutrality
Balancing there,
leveling of the playing field with some of these back-to-backs too. And there's a couple long homestands in this season. So January and March will have 9-game homestands. So even though that January is packed with some really tough competition, they're going to see Winnipeg, they're going to see Dallas, they're going to see Edmonton, and they're going to see Florida. But they're going to get them at home in that month of January. So I think that's going to be an incredibly fun month. And then that other long homestand comes after the 4-nation face-off. So they come back and they just play a ton of hockey at home. And so I think to your point about the rhythm, that does help them a lot, I think, to come out of that break and just be at home and get back into the swing of things, sleeping in their own beds. So I do think those are some things that are favorable about this schedule.
I do want to touch more on January and more on the 4 Nations break in a little bit. But before we do, I want to stick with this back-to-back and 3 and 4 conversation with this chat from Adrian in the Toyota chat saying, our back-to-backs and these 3 and 4s more of a problem for the Avs than other squads, with Georgieve slated to get a significant portion of the starts again. My heart says no, because I hope Annunen gets more starts this year. My head says, yeah, probably. We know Bednar is never afraid to run Georgieve out for both sides of a back-to-back if he feels like he needs those wins. So it's definitely going to be something the Avs may have a harder time managing than some of these other teams. What I will say is, even with these 3 and 4s, there's only 2 places on the schedule. I think I counted it. I might have missed one. There's only 2 places where they play 4 and 6. So almost always after that 3 and 4, they get a 2-day break at least to recover a little bit. So it doesn't feel like quite as much of a meat grinder as some of these stretches of schedule it felt last year and the year before for Colorado, where it felt like they were playing 10 games in 16 days or something crazy. But yeah, I do think it could be an issue.
Well, to answer the question too, like a lot of times, like those back-to-backs are circumstances. In the sense, what I'm trying to say is, God, you did the 6-7 games before that back-to-back. You might have, played some tough games and overtime games, and where guys really got a lot of mileage on them, like Mac or Nathan, or you know what I mean. There just happened to be close games, and guys are averaging 26, 27 minutes instead of a couple games where it got away from them, or they took the lead and they only played 21 or 22 minutes. So it does add up. Those minutes do add up. So, which is, you can't look at it today and say, oh, that's going to be a tough back-to-back. You know what I mean? Because it's in the future. Again, we got to play the game. So, but I'll tell you one thing, and I'll say it again. I love back-to-backs. I don't mind back-to-backs. I do feel, and that's where the Avs record shows. Again, Megan just said it was 70 and 20, whatever, give and take, that ridiculous amount of games. I mean, I do believe if you're on top of your game, you have the advantage. If the team did not play the night before, you do have the advantage in the first half of the game. Where you don't have it is in the last period, obviously, because your legs are giving up, a little bit from underneath you. But the Avs are so powerful, and they've been such a good team that they usually take the lead, right? Of course, I'm not talking about the first goal of the game. I'm talking about by the end of the second period, they usually have the lead. So that's where, they should have the advantage, because when you play the night before, you're just a little more fresh, a little more ready to go. And I'll say it again, like, you take one day off in the National Hockey League, like it's so weird because you put your gear on, you feel out of sync, you feel like, you know what I mean? With a true day off, which I love days off too, don't get me wrong. But you just feel like crap when you get back out there. It's the weirdest feeling in the world. And I'm not saying that it's not beneficial to take a day off. I'm saying that sometimes, especially the Avs, the way they're built on a back-to-back, they do have the advantage. And then, again, I agree with you. And, to answer Adrian's question too, like, I think this is the year you're going to see Eustace play more because I think you're going to see him stick to a plan here as a team. They're going to get that schedule out that we just saw. They're going to circle some games out at the start and say, hey, we got to get him in there. We got to see what we got. And then you earn your starts after that as well, right? You earn more starts. But I'm talking about there's not a lot of back-to-backs, obviously, at the start. But I think they're going to start circling them there in November and see what Eustace can do. And I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think Eustace is going to be just fine on a back-to-back.
All right. Well, we will continue this rest versus rust conversation. But before we do, look, half the battle in these back-to-backs is the mental side. You got to come prepared. You got to know that you're going 2 days in a row and be ready for it. And that is where we are super excited to talk about our partnership with UC Health. UC Health knows how important mental health is and encourages Coloradans to live their healthiest lives through statewide initiatives that include taking care of your mental health. They want you to live like there is a tomorrow. If you haven't checked it out with UC Health, they have a ton of awesome stories, including David Schlicht, who is a Colorado teenager who loves being active and outdoors and is a prime example of someone taking care of their mental health and living like there is a tomorrow. I don't want to spoil the story too much, but he was an Olympic hopeful who had a bad ski training accident, and UC Health helped him get back with his life and get his life back in order. So you can go check it out and learn more about David and taking care of your mental health with UC Health over at uchealth.org/tomorrow. You can go find a bunch of inspiring patient stories to learn what it means to live like there is a tomorrow with UC Health. And then we're also brought to you by the folks who present the show over at Toyota. Make sure you're getting yourself in a Toyota at your Front Range Toyota dealerships. They have 17 different all-wheel or four-wheel drive vehicles, so you can get yourself out on the trail, out off roads, or out if you're... I know my buddy's taking a trip to Lake McConaughey right now, so if you're a road tripper, Toyota's the way to get you there. Go jump on that. And they also have 16 different hybrid zero-emission vehicles, which is the most of anyone. So make sure you go check it out with Toyota, whether you like trucks like the Tacoma, SUVs like the 4Runner, or even sedans like the Corolla. Toyota's got the vehicles for you. Toyota is the official vehicle of both the Colorado Avalanche and DNVR. Make sure you're checking out your Front Range Toyota dealerships, including AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I wanted to drill down on that conversation that you were having, Eric, because there is one particular back-to-back that sticks out to me as a really weird one this season. And that's the one coming directly off of the Four Nations Cup break, or whatever you want to, what is normally the All-Star break. So that is, for some of the Avs, a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 days off into a back-to-back immediately. And then for the stars of the Avs, that's not really a break at all. Right into a back-to-back, jumping back into the playing with their NHL team. How do you guys feel about having a back-to-back in a situation like that? I guess I'll ask.
I'm going to rewind the tape there in 98, first time the Olympics, right? The guys went to the Olympics. And I'm a player, and I got to be honest with you, you look at the start of the year, that schedule, and you're like, wow, this is going to be sick. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't have days off, right? I mean, you got to remember, Christmas, we had like barely 24 hours off, like Christmas Day. You know what I mean? So you were like basically I never went anywhere. Like I just stayed wherever I was and got on the plane that day. And so when you look at that in 98, we were like, oh my God, this is crazy. Then you start thinking a little bit like, well, how's this gonna, like, how are we gonna do this? Like, you know, are we taking all the days off, or they're gonna make us practice? Obviously, I mean, the Avs, you would think they make them practice maybe on the 17th there or something. I don't know what the league rule is. It's all league mandated now with the PA and everything. But so you'll have at least 4 or 5 practices. But it's not normal to take that long and that lengthy of a break. So you're like your body kind of heals, so to speak. I didn't mind it as a player, and then you came back, and then you have a few practices, and then you go play the game. But it feels like a September game, October game, a little bit all over again because you just haven't been up to snuff. You know what I mean? And then on the flip side, the other guys that are all-stars that are on the Four Nations teams and they come back, it's a little bit like the Olympics back then. And I just feel that those guys are tired and you're right. And then you go right into a back-to-back. It's like, what is it, Hayman Corner or whatever during the Masters? Like, it just feels like, oh my God, something's going to give, right? Something bad's going to happen, whether it's a loss or an injury, knock on wood, or, things like that. And I remember after that working in management and absolutely just hate those breaks because if you're playing good, you have that break and you're like, oh God. And then you come back and sometimes you're a little bit out of sync. Look at the Avs last year. Remember they came back after the break? I felt they were just freaking awful, right? After the All-Star break. And, again, I don't have it in front of me. I'm talking out of remembering the season last year. I just feel that sometimes having a break like that is tough, especially if you're playing well. And you come back and you're on the road, which, Nashville, St. Louis, who knows? I mean, who knows how those teams are going to be? They should be fine. It should be decent teams. But it's pretty hard. Yeah, and you're like, hey, welcome back. I know you guys had a break. And whoever was at the Four Nations, welcome back. Now you're back with your own team. You know what I mean? You're tired from playing in the finals or whatever it was, however that's going to play out. Then you got to come back and play it back to back. Kind of nice those 2 days after that before they play Jersey at home. But again, this is the part that I don't like these whether it's the Olympics or it's great for the players. I'm not saying that. I think it's awesome as a player. They want to be in those Olympics and all that stuff. And again, this one I think it's a little different. I wouldn't say that this is the Olympics, the Four Nations, but again, it is some sort of a better in the All-Star game. We'll put it that way. You know what I mean? Meaning a little more competition, a little more. But then as working in management, you look back and you're like, God, I wish my guy would have had some time off instead of being there. You know what I mean? I just feel that this is where I go, and I think everybody understands that you're paid. You make a lot of money for that team. And when you take a break of a week or two and you're going there and something happens, God forbid, like knock on wood, that somebody gets hurt, you're like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? And it's just like you cross your fingers, I feel, and that's why owners don't like it. It's not because they're bad people. It's just, it's tough. I mean, there's been some examples over the years, right? There just has been. The closest one I think is probably Tavares, right? The last Olympics was it, and came back and he was out.
Yep.
I remember Joe back then being hurt too. You know what I mean, and coming back, and he was awesome. Then he needed some time off, and so I don't know. I'm just saying, but I feel for the guys' legs and their heartbeat on that back-to-back coming back. Yes, I agree with that statement from you.
The Avs don't usually benefit from rest. They came out of Christmas break a little rough for a couple seasons now, came out of the All-Star break and had one of the worst stretches of hockey in season. They actually matched that later in the season, but it was right before the deadline. People were beginning to panic about this team and feeling that it really needed some retooling because of how they came out of the All-Star break last year. And the person I think it affects the most is Cale Makar, because he has not been shy about seeing that he does not mind opportunity to rest his body. And you look at his utilization on ice, and he is constantly leading the league in ice time among all skaters. And it's because of how important he is to the team. And unfortunately, he will not be getting a break during this period. Nope. It's a little bit weird. They go from playing hockey February 7th to not playing hockey again until February 22nd, unless you're a player like Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen. And so for Makar, I think that's going to be a little bit tough just because he's adjusting to this new normal of his body not feeling totally 100% throughout the year, though not being injured, just feeling a little bit off and still being utilized so much. The other challenge is all of these games come about on the road, and so there's a little bit of travel involved too. So they're going into this back-to-back Nashville, St. Louis on the road.
Yep.
Not a bad travel schedule from one to the other, but it's just a little bit funky in that stretch. I think that they come out of it and then they come and play a lot of games at home, and that's going to be helpful to them. You know, the earlier comment about coming and sleeping in their own beds out of the Four Nation face-off break, I think will be good for them. But I do think with what we've come to know about the Avs, we should tamper expectation a little bit about how they might look coming out of this break, at least in the immediate.
Yeah, I agree fully. That back-to-back, my expectations are low. We'll put it that way. I want to take us on a little bit of a tangent with this Four Nations conversation for a minute, so humor me a little bit here. I understand this isn't realistic because of the salary cap and concerns about quality of product, but I don't know if you guys watch the MLS or the NWSL at all and how these soccer leagues, at least in North America, do it. There are events where a bunch of players go to their national teams and the league just keeps playing. They have, they'll call up prospects. They'll have depth players come in and play games for the team. Is that something the NHL should consider doing? And again, I understand logistically it would be very difficult, but one, you don't run into that problem. Then the players who've gone and played for their national team don't end up playing 120 hockey games that year or whatever, because the team kind of keeps up on its schedule and it misses that 5-10 games, whatever it ends up being. And two, it gives more opportunity for organizations to figure out what they have as organizational depth. And maybe more opportunity for a guy like a Jean-Luc Foudy or something like that. Am I dreaming here, or would that be cool?
I think that it's fun to the viewer, but I think the players that have to leave for their respective tournaments would be upset by it because those points matter. And I think that there would be a few teams that would have players that don't like this, wouldn't like that.
I agree. I mean, God, it's hard when you're comparing, but you're right. I was asking, like, I think Andre, or I don't remember, like, I was trying to figure out this soccer thing. Because I'm a one-trick pony. I say it all the time. But I was trying to figure out, like, a few months ago, what the hell's going on there in soccer? Guys leave. I don't understand. Like, they go play for the, all that stuff. And then the league keeps going. And I didn't really understand it. I don't think I'd be for it as a player. Honestly, I wouldn't be for it. I know what you're saying about opportunities and stuff, which is, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it would be, right? It would give other people opportunities. I don't know. Like, I'm going to go with NHL owners right away. They'd be the first ones to say no. You know what I mean?
For sure. They would not go for it.
Yeah, I mean, because you're penalized, right? If you're good, if your team's good, that means the more guys you're going to have on those national teams, right? Like 98, we had like 13 guys, I think, at the Olympics. So it was crazy. Like, there was no one practicing back at McNichols because we're just the shit bums that didn't make the Olympic teams of our countries, So, So you would think like the Avs would have a lot of guys because they're so good, and But you're right. I mean, it's fun to spitball. Like it is. It's a good question. And even I don't know. As a fan, do you like that? Maybe. I mean, I think as a player in the minors, you love it, right?
Right. If you like prospects, you love it.
If you're degenerates like us, you love it. If you're a casual hockey fan, maybe not so much. But
yeah, true. And if you're a call-up, you love it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Like, logistically, if you were going to do that, you'd have to have a taxi squad that, like, doesn't apply to the cat. It'd get really, really hard to actually mechanically do it. So it'd be tough. Put it to you that way. The other side of that conversation, and Megan, you started to get into it with Cale Makar. I don't want to say that the Avs are the little brother to the NBA, but in a lot of ways it feels like they are when it comes to promoting their sport and things like that. They always kind of seem to follow in step with things that the NBA does. Load management. Is that a thing that we are going to start seeing more of, particularly an NHL that is about to go back-to-back years with the Four Nations Cup and then the Olympics. So your best players are going to be playing, even the ones that don't make the playoffs. You're talking about, I guess Four Nations isn't that bad. It's only a handful of games. With the Olympic year, you're talking about players that could be playing 95, 100 games just in the regular season time frame. And then the ones that go to the playoffs, you're talking about even more. Over 2 years, some of these guys are probably going to play north of 200 games. Is there a certain point where the NHL starts having their stars take days off? I know culturally the NHL has always been a very, if I can play, I'm going to play league. But it just feels like at a certain point that has to be unsustainable, right?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. I agree with you, and it's all about how far you go that year in the playoffs or the year before, right? It starts to add up. I mean, if you didn't make the playoffs and your star player goes to the Olympics, you're talking about 2 months of grueling hockey compared to, let's say, McKinnon, if they end up going all the way and winning the cup, right? That's 2 months of grueling hockey, tough on your body. And what it does, there's two parts to it, is that part. Then the second part is your summer's not cut short on training. You got to remember, they use the summer to get themselves ready for the rigorous, 82 game schedule in the NHL. That's where you get yourself ready to go. This is where in those 3.5 months, whatever it is, 4 months, depending on how quickly you lose in the playoffs, are crucial to your year. And you hear it all the time from the guys. They didn't have time to train this summer because of the short summer, or they had a surgery and they couldn't really train the way they should to get themselves ready, and then they play catch up when the season starts. So it makes a big difference. And then you go, like you said, to the Olympics, and then those guys play so many minutes in a game. Think about it. Compare Nate to I don't know, Chris Wagner. You know what I mean? It's the amount of minutes they add up. I mean, you're talking about, hours and hours and hours of playing more than a regular person on the third, fourth line. So it does add up. It does feel that load management is a thing. It's always been a thing. I'll go back to 98. Those guys, and I do believe, and I'll say it again, I do believe in 97, a big reason why we lost the cup is losing in the semis to Detroit was because of the long summer, meaning they won the cup in 96, and then that World Cup happened, and it just didn't give enough time for the guys to reset, and then they were just, and when I say they, your core guy, the Forsberg, the Sakic. So again, we're talking about Nate here and Makar and the load management. So I do believe to this day that even though a guy like Nate's a horse and he's a dog, and we always make fun in a good way of him that he's a machine, and somehow you got to be smart here with what's coming up the next couple of years. And I think Bednar and company and those guys, and Joe should be the guy. I haven't lived it. I haven't been a high profile guy that went through all those battles, and he should be a guy that, and I'm sure he is, that is just kind of giving his 2 cents a little bit. And there comes a time in the middle of February, or whatever it is, January, it's don't come to the rink. Stay home. and it's so easy to say, for anyone that's asking, is, oh, it's, what, he had a cold, he has a cold, he's at home, he should be back tomorrow. And that's okay. You know what I mean? It's you got, and those things add up. You do 5, 6, 7 times during the year of those days, you might be able to salvage a little bit of that fatigue down the stretch.
Yeah. I do want to get Megan's thoughts too, but first, 3 days specifically to circle on your calendar for the schedule. November 15th versus Washington, January 4th versus Montreal, and February 28th versus Minnesota. Those 3 games, we at DNVR are taking over Ball Arena. We're riding the party bus down to the rink. Come watch a hockey game with us. You can sit in the stands with me and Eric and enjoy some fantastic hockey that hopefully the Avs win. They're 4-1 on our takeovers. They're pretty good when we take over. You also, of course, get the bus ride. You get free beer on the bus. Just a great old time to come watch some hockey with us here at DNVR. So go check it out. Make sure you head over to thednvr.com and go to our events page to get your tickets on the party bus and join us for some fantastic Avalanche hockey. You You can also check out our other events too. If you're a football fan, we have some travel takeovers for the Buffs and the Broncos. Once you're all signed up with us to go enjoy yourself at these takeovers, make sure you're also putting some money down on those games with Bet365. You can sign up with code DNVR365 today, and you get a $5 bet on anything. You'll get $150 in bonus bets just for putting the bet down. I'm going hard on the Olympics. I don't know if y'all have been watching it, but I just watched the sprint show on Netflix. Who you got? Sha'Carri Richardson or Sharika Jackson? Who's winning the gold in the 100-meter women's?
Sha'Carri.
You think Sha'Carri?
I
think Sharika's going to beat her.
God.
I'm not very American, I guess, because I don't root for the Americans a lot of the time in the Olympics. But that's okay. It doesn't matter who you root for with Bet365. When you gamble over there, of course, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. Megan, did you have any thoughts on the resting players potentially?
Well, I just wanted to reinforce what Eric is talking about with some of these players pulled from teams that are playoff contenders, that have deep runs in the postseason, because there is absolutely a correlation with even just the preliminary rosters for the Four Nations face-off.
Yep.
There is significant representation of teams that made a strong push in these last playoffs.
Yep.
You know, Florida's well represented, Dallas is well represented, a little biased, Colorado is well represented. And so I think that is absolutely then something that is going to weigh heavily on players' minds, teams' minds, when their players are being sent to these international tournaments. And they're also expecting a lot of extra hockey well into the playoffs just because of the toll it takes on their bodies. So
Yep.
I just wanted to reinforce Eric's point that he is making about why this might have some implications in this, in next couple of years, just because of that, those types of players being represented very well in these competitions.
It's a great point that it is a little bit wonky with the Four Nations because, Russia isn't going. There's a couple of other nations where you feel like there are some top-end players that aren't going. But certainly with the Olympics, you're essentially saying, yeah, we're just exhausting all of our top-end talent. And realistically, like, I can't see the future. I'm not making predictions here, but anything less than, at minimum, the second round would be a disappointment for a team like Colorado, both of these coming seasons. I'm sure the same is true of Florida. I'm sure the same is true of teams like New York. Pick whoever your contenders are. And you see that, and you're like, are we really signing up these players to play 110 games minimum a year? Like, and yes, don't get me wrong. I love the Olympics. I cannot wait.
I think the players will also care a lot about the Olympics too.
Yeah, same. But you have to keep in mind the impacts that is putting on the players as much as anyone else. I did want to move on. You mentioned that stretch in January, just to nail it down. It starts January 6th at home against Florida. Then they travel for two parts of a back-to-back, Chicago and Minnesota. That's followed up by another road game in Winnipeg. Then they hit a really difficult homestand where they play New York, Edmonton, Dallas, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. And then they kind of finish up that stretch with another travel back-to-back with Boston and the Rangers. The middle 3 weeks of January will pretty much show us where the Avs are this year, it feels like. You're going to come out of that stretch thinking either the Avs are probably near the top of the West or somewhere in the middle in a dogfight. Eric, let me ask you this. When you see stretches like that, when you see, oh, man, we're about to play 9 good teams in the next 11 games, is there motivation there? Is there oh God, this is going to be awful? What's the vibe in the locker room going into those stretches?
Well, again, we say it all the time. You want to be about, you want to say you're a championship team, or are you about being a championship team, right? So that has a lot to do with it. It's the aura. Obviously, we know the standards here in Colorado with Coach Bednar's been there long enough now. He doesn't need to readdress that every year. The core's been there long enough. Those guys, it's cup or bust every year. So in order to go in the cup, that means you got to go through the 6 months of the schedule that are sometimes tough. Now, if you look at the Avs, I do believe And again, some people say like, oh, they don't play well against those shitty teams. Well, again, I think sometimes it's overblown a little bit, you know what I mean? Because when you look at it, they play good against pretty much everyone. And when you get 100 and some points, that means you had a good season. So
look, the thing we always say on this show is even the best NHL teams ever lose 20 games every year. Like
you will, and that's my point. Now, so when you're getting ready and you look at the month and you're like, oh wow, this is a lot of good teams, and you're challenging yourself. You're playing against good teams, and that's what you want. You want to play against good teams. And again, every team is good in the NHL, but there is a difference between a first-place team and the 32nd place team. There is a difference. But if you're not on your game, yeah, the 32nd place team can beat anyone. We all know that. But I think you challenge yourself. The Avalanche in that schedule in January, they're going to challenge themselves. They're going to see, okay, like you just said it, we'll see where we're at. We'll see exactly what we're made of. And then obviously the February is funky because of the Four Nations, and I think we'll get to it after that in March. But I love March. I do. I love their March because they got a lot of home games, and I think by then you're talking about a little bit of load management. If you're smart and you got enough points in the piggy bank, that's where you can do that a little bit. You can do that and kind of wink rest some guys. You know what I mean, at some point, and that's I do believe that it sets up pretty nice for them in that sense.
They'll see Winnipeg 3 times in a 30-day window, kind of coming out of that Christmas break. They'll see them and then into January, home and away. And I think that Winnipeg is a team, after the way the series went for them this last playoffs, that are going to want to get some licks in on Colorado. And so I think it's going to be filled with so many great tests. Obviously, seeing Dallas again should be emotionally charged for them as well. Always facing the reigning Stanley Cup champion in Florida, also very fun. These are important tests too. Like, you want to see them when it's the lesser competition win out, but you also want to see them go toe to toe with really competitive teams. And I think that it's going to be important for them to get into the swing of things as quickly as possible coming out of that Christmas break, because like we're all talking about, this is a crazy January, and to your earlier point too, you're going to want to see what this team is made of well before the deadline and hope that it looks a little more complete than it did last year before the deadline. Yep.
To your point, they do have the scam game coming out of the Christmas break that they always have against Utah now instead of Arizona, where it's the same day travel game. So, hate that.
I've never liked it. It's always a weird game. I'm excited. So I know too, like, some of the prep for the show was, what games are you circling in your calendar just for fun? And generally any of the Utah games, because there's an existing bitterness, I think, between these teams, but a new energy around the fan base. And so I'm curious to see how these teams match up on ice with a new fan base around that Utah team that's probably really excited in the inaugural season. Is the atmosphere even more electric than usual? Because I think Arizona and Colorado were weirdly tense games a lot of the time. So I'm excited to see any of those matchups.
Nathan McKinnon just didn't like the Arizona Coyotes.
And I think he still won't like Utah.
I agree. I don't think it was Arizona that was the problem. It's the dudes who are putting on the jerseys that might be the problem.
I can't put my finger on it exactly. Is it Carter Garland alone? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm all the way down to body the little brother. It's fine. We're good with that. You mentioned the 3 games against Winnipeg and something else you mentioned there. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you guys the question anyway. If you had a cup contending team and one of the worst contending teams in the league, you could only win one of those games, which team would you rather win against?
Say that again. So if you
have, I'll just give you 2 specific teams, Florida and Chicago. You can only win against one of them. Which team would you rather win against?
Oh, me? Me at Florida.
Florida.
You want to be the best. You want to measure yourself up against the best, and that's why repeating. And you'll hear Paul Maurice all October talking about teams gunning for them. It's like that every year. You gun for the champ, right? You want to see what you're made of. Those guys just did it, and you just want to dethrone them, and that's why my answer is Florida right away.
It's Florida for me too, and it's because of the postseason implications. Every time you win against a team in the regular season, there's important learning that happens. And when you find ways to win against a good team that you might meet in the postseason later on, I think that's just useful information and knowledge that can be applied very practically later.
It's an easy Florida for me, and I'm assuming just about everyone, because let's be honest. Yes, every point matters. You got to make the playoffs. I understand that. But for good teams where I don't want to say making the playoffs is the given, but certainly it's the expectation, the loss to Chicago is meaningless at the end of the day if you make the playoffs, because guess what? You're not going to see Chicago in April. You know, you don't feel like, oh, well, we couldn't beat them in the regular season because they won't be there. Florida, yeah, they're going to be there. You might feel a little bit better about that team. Obviously, the Avs wouldn't play Florida into the Cup final, but you know what I mean. And sure, I get that the regular season doesn't really mean a whole lot in the playoffs, but from a confidence standpoint as a team, I would say a loss to a bad team is less detrimental than a win against a good team is positive for a hockey team. So that's how I feel about it.
I agree.
All right, let's keep it rolling here. I do want to get to other games you guys have pointed out, but very quickly, I want to talk about the end of the schedule. Something I think in recent years, the NHL had done a pretty good job of setting up good matchups in April. The end of this year's schedule kind of sucks for Colorado. You have a Chicago-Columbus back-to-back, probably two teams that won't be playing meaningful hockey. You have a St. Louis game that could be meaningful, but I don't have a lot of faith in St. Louis to be in the conversation in the Central. And then you have a Vegas game, which could be interesting at the top of the West for sure. A Vancouver game, which could be interesting at the top of the West. But then you end the season with a travel back-to-back for Colorado and LA and Anaheim. I don't know. The end of that season just doesn't excite me very much.
This is to the earlier conversation around Jussi Saarinen, where especially those last three games are going to be kind of jam-packed.
Yep.
I don't like to deem teams as lesser competition, but against lesser competition like Chicago, Jussi Saarinen shut them out. Chicago, that is, 5-0 twice.
Yep.
You have to give them that Anaheim game at the end of the year. And, you know, this is where I think you just have to have a little more trust, especially prior to that, with Jussi Saarinen and give him some opportunity there, because it is a little bit tough schedule-wise, but I do think LA, Vancouver, Vegas is tough too, just
for sure,
by itself, for what it's worth. I think those are going to be three tough games for them to kind of withstand, because at that point, hopefully, their playoff future is at least decided, and they're able to make some decisions, sit some guys out for rests. But if they're not, those are going to be some pretty tough games to close out the season.
Fair point.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking at the timing too, 2 p.m., so it's not that bad of a back-to-back. That LA Anaheim's such an easy back-to-back, you know, and it's a 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., so it doesn't look that bad. But you guys are right. You know, you got Vegas and Vancouver. Those are, you know, you would think that both of them will be good teams, and you know, in the race, and so it'll be interesting to see. But then again, I always say, how the heck do we know what's going to happen? You know, I mean, we don't even know what those teams are going to be like, and you know, what's it going to be? Are the Avs going to be 30 points in a playoff spot? They're going to be 4 points in a, you know, hanging on. Are they going to be 2 points back chasing? So a lot's going to happen, and you know, again, Rudo says it all the time. You can only play the games that are on the schedule, so you got to go and play all those games to see where you land at those games. But you're right, it's pretty uneventful, you know, of a month, in a sense. Like, it's not like, and again, who knows? Maybe that St. Louis game will be huge, or the VGK game will be huge. Who knows? We'll see. But it sure doesn't sound like it today in the middle of July, you know.
Yep. All right. We can move on to some standout games. I'm going to go first and take the obvious one. November 29th, it is the front half of a back-to-back, but that first game against Dallas, the team that eliminated you in the playoffs, it always feels like there's a little something extra when you go up against that team. So by then, the Avs should be in full swing of their schedule. They should be, to some extent, playing hockey the way they want to play. Really curious to see how that matchup goes. And it's inside of a week of playing Florida, too. So that's one I have circled. Any other ones you guys really had that caught your eye as you were looking through the schedule?
I bolded both of the 29th and the 30th because they go on to play Edmonton immediately after
cup
that.
final team,
and so I think that the implications of being able to stave off both teams would send a strong message that they deserved a better fate in these last playoffs, right?
Sure.
They kind of have to internally answer that question. Did we deserve to go further? And I think that being able to beat these two teams in that moment really won't have that much significance, but it's probably a good confidence builder for them to at least prove to themselves, we deserved a better fate. We can beat teams like Dallas. We can beat teams like Edmonton. And we can do it on the second leg of a back-to-back.
It would be impressive to do it.
I'm going to go end of March there. March 22nd.
You want to talk about March. We can get into that.
Yeah, no, but I'm going to go end of March. I'm thinking like a player right now. Obviously, whenever you're from, that's my hometown, Montreal, and I think you're always looking to be like, especially if you're in the Western Conference, hey, you only get to go one game to be in front of friends and family, and so I would always look at, okay, when is that game? And it doesn't get better than that. March 22nd, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada. That's what I grew up on. So then I think as a young kid, like Sam Girard, probably looking at that game and go, oh my God. Yeah. But then again, you look at your wallet and you're like, oh God, are we going to cost him like 100 tickets?
Sam Girard is half the province is going to come to that game for Sam.
his hometown's going to come, you know what I mean? And it's just like, so for me, that's the one I used to always look at, especially being in the Western Conference, you always look to see, or the guys from Toronto a couple days before do the same thing. You know what I mean? And plus It is a crazy media market, right? Toronto, you're making that swing there, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal. So it's kind of fun and crazy. And, those are the fun ones that you circle at the start of the year.
Last thing I wanted to touch on, I don't know if you guys saw the tweet that came out the other day for total travel miles per team. Avs rank 18th in total travel miles. Pretty reasonable. Usually they're in like the top 5 for total miles traveled in a year. Granted, there is some stuff this year like Dallas traveling overseas to play some games that puts them up at the top that maybe skew the numbers a little bit. But does that matter at all? Does saving a few hundred miles, 1,000 miles here and there add up for a team to get a little bit more rest, or is that just some numbers that people like to look at?
Who's won? LA?
Dallas is one.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're going overseas.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Then who's 2 and 3? Like LA, Vancouver,
Florida, Anaheim.
There you go.
Okay, so LA, Anaheim, pretty close. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I played some crazy years in LA, and I'll tell you one thing. We were always in the top 3 in the league in mileage. It was absolutely ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, you play in Colorado, then you get traded to New York. Oh, my God. Wow. Not the same season. You go play 82 games for the Rangers. It's not the same thing as playing 82 games for Anaheim Ducks, let's say, in the top 3 there. It is not. It is not. You have to approach it as a coaching staff totally different. It's not the same thing. I bet you by the end of the year you have at least 12, 13, 14 less practices, than those teams. It's crazy what it does to your body. It is a tough. The Western Conference, I don't care what people say, it is true. Oh yeah, but you fly on private jets. Oh, perfect. It's awesome. I'm not talking about. Thank God. You know what I mean? Because I don't know how those guys did it back then. Commercial flights and you know what I mean? Like it's just absolutely nuts on your body, just body alone, like the dehydration that you accumulate in the air there. It's absolutely ridiculous. It makes a big freaking difference. So it is a fact. It is not fiction. It's a fact that it's tough, and you have to handle the way you practice and travel and do all that kind of stuff. Totally different than New York Rangers or New York Islanders.
Well, the top 10, 8 of them are Western Conference teams.
Yep.
And I think to your question, Rudo, it's quite a mix of, like, you look at the top and it's Dallas and Florida, teams that have traveled the most, but also made pretty impressive
They do
playoff
pretty well,
runs.
yeah.
Immediately followed by Anaheim. So you look at kind of like the quality of the team and how far they've gone and this list, and I don't know that there's much correlation. It's a marginal, I think, impact on the team performance. But it did make me think of that YouTube video that came out that was really focused around Val Nichushkin, but talked a little bit with Trenin and Georgieve.
Yep.
And Georgieve opened up about some of the accommodations that different teams provide.
How Arizona suck.
And I wonder if that has maybe some influence too
Maybe.
on team
Fair.
performance alongside travel. Like which teams really go the extra mile to make sure their players are really comfortable versus not. And Eric could probably better speak to something like that.
That Four Seasons bed, a little bit better than the Hyatt bed, huh?
Listen, I'm going to say something right to Megan's point right there. And again, I'm going to use my dad again. I love when I say it. I'm not going to say I hate it. Quebec Nordiques, and I'm not here to bash the Quebec Nordiques, but one of the reasons the approach they took was complete opposite of what those guys were doing, which was the worst flights. They were flying that freaking airline. I don't remember the name of that airline. My dad went on one flight with the Quebec Nordiques. He said this was the last flight. Never again. I love my life. I value my life. I value the players' lives. They will never fly with this. And he said, from now on, it's and then Jean Martineau, we should have him as a guest here. You know what? That's I'm gonna have him talk to him about that. He should be a full show on this. It's a great point, Megan. And then they start going to Ritz-Carlton, and you're gonna say, "Oh my God, you're spoiling them, and they're such prima donna." No. You're taking the excuses away. That's what you're doing. That's all you're doing as management, as ownership, as you're giving them, and you treat them like human beings and not like pieces of brick or pieces of wood or whatever it is you want to say, that brick and mortar, So
Garbage.
it's very important, and it makes a difference. I'll tell you one thing, it makes a difference. Hey, I always say this to you. I am not that old. I am old, but I'm not that old. And I remember playing in Ottawa and walking in my flight with my ticket and having a middle seat on a commercial flight. And I'm like giving peanuts. And I was sitting there and I was dying because I was like, what? At the end of my career, I was like, what? They still fly commercial, like for some of those flights, and you don't realize how much you are spoiled. It makes a big difference. You know what I mean? So yeah, it is a good point. It's a valid point, and it does make a difference when you treat the team and the players the right way. It goes a long way with them.
Well, Avs fans are certainly spoiled with Nathan MacKinnon. I just dropped a new video on our YouTube channel going over his 140-point season, and like some of the numbers in that video are actually ridiculous, by the way. So you might want to go watch it, go check it out, and see how Nathan MacKinnon won the Hart this year with his offense. Highly recommend you get in on that. That's pretty much all I had for the day. Any other things you guys wanted to touch on?
I saw Susie's thing there on, I think on the DNVR Rockies, right, about the being on the road there that one time. And it's funny because I was like, yard goats. And then it happened to us. It happened to me, my second year pro, St. John's Maple Leafs. We played the whole year on the road. We played one home game at the start of the year, went on the road, came back for the second round of the playoffs. So that was cool to see, you know what I mean? Like, and it was, I could relate to that, you know what I mean? It's kind of nuts, and I don't know how some guys did it, but again, I didn't have kids or all that kind of stuff.
I couldn't do it.
So,
I'll tell you that.
No, I'm being honest with you, because you know why you can't. It was hard. You didn't know from one week to another where we were going next. Where was going to be our home base for a week. You know what I mean? It was crazy. So, and to some people that are so methodical and planning, it was just like, I don't know, we'll let you know. And it just didn't go well with them, But it was fun. I thought it was a cool piece she had, and. Yeah, and then tomorrow we'll have some fun night with Joe and former Avalanche coach Joe Sacco, so he'll jump on with us tomorrow, so it'll be fun.
I'm looking forward to that interview.
Yeah, it should be a good one. So please join us for that. Like and subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. Go check out all of our other content. Check us out at thednvr.com. Also going to have another video coming out in a couple days that's diehards only about MacKinnon. So keep your eyes out for that too. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us on this one. Also, shout out Melanie. We forgot to do her super chat the other day. So we're shouting you out now. Thank you so much for always hanging out and being awesome. That's it. We're out of here. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
the mayor.